Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here. I'm born in Britain, but I live in Palo Alto, and I come back quite a lot because Accelerated Digital Ventures is a UK venture fund. It's about a year old. And today, the goal is to give you some clues if you're trying to raise money about what you need to be thinking about to be successful. And they've asked me to talk about my own life. I'm a serial entrepreneur. As you can see, I'm not a young person. So there's 4 decades of history that I'm going to go through very, very quickly because this is 15 minutes. But I'm going to go through 4 decades of history talking about what I did wrong and hopefully what I did right. And from that, there's some lessons. So let's start. There's really only 4 things you could do as a startup founder in terms of explaining or talking about your goals. You could think small and act small. You could think big and act big. You could think small and act big, or you could think big and act small. And only one of those is right. 3 of them are completely doomed to failure. And I say that with experience. So let's get into the decades. This is the 1980s. And it felt pretty good, I've got to tell you that. It did feel pretty good. But I was thinking small and acting small. I was born in Scarborough, which for those of you who are not from the UK is a small town of 50,000 people on the northeast coast of Yorkshire. And I was in a working class family. I was born on a council estate. And like many people born on council estates who are a little bit smart, I was totally pissed off. Thought there was something wrong with the world that made my life, you know, the life of a poor person. I was the oldest child of 6, and I was the first kid in my family to go to university, ever. And I chose to study political science and sociology because I thought I could learn why the world is so screwed up and fix it. And so I went to Canterbury. I'm on the alumni board today. I went to Canterbury, studied political science and sociology, became a political activist, mainly fighting against racism, helping people with immigration issues or police issues, and started the Troops Out of Ireland movement here in the UK as well, from the belief that it isn't right that you take over someone's country and cut it in 2, which could be applied to many parts of the British Empire. And so I was kind of thinking big. I wanted to change the world, and if there's one thing about me, it was change. And so I learned to code. I learned to code at 20, and I wrote on a computer called a Tandy TRS-80, if there's anyone old enough in the room to remember those. And in learning to code, suddenly started to have a business, doing database software and networks. And I started this company called Micro Consultant and Software Support Services. The name itself tells you how small I was thinking. I figured out the name was really bad quickly and changed it to Brent Computer Services, which I was, you know, when you think about it, Brent is not a very big place. So that was also thinking small. But I managed to get it to about £7 million a year in revenue, just by being scrappy, because not very many people did networks in the 1980s. Ethernet had not yet been invented. We used telephone cables to create networks, and most databases were single user. So multi-user databases were quite rare. So if you could do multi-user databases and networks, you could make money. And we were a 2-person business by 1993 doing £7 million a year. But I was definitely thinking small and acting small. I never tried to raise money because I didn't know you could. I had no clue people would give you money for equity in your business. So it was all about billing, collecting the money, spending it, and then billing some more. And that company still exists today, by the way. It's changed its names many times. Channel Siberia, then Seascape, and today it's called Clarkswell. If you go to clarkswell.co.uk, it's still there. So the 1980s, it wasn't terrible. It was actually pretty good. But I was never going to build a world-scale business, and I didn't even know I should try. 1990s. I want to wait till the song. 1990s, I was pretty bored with my database business. It was almost making too much money for not enough effort, because we were getting service contracts for software that paid out so that we should show up if it went wrong, but it didn't go wrong, so we never needed to show up. So I was sitting at home, literally, in Kensal Green, in my dressing gown every morning, learning about what was going on in technology, and I discovered this thing called the internet, 93. There was a company called Demon here in the UK, which was mainly an academic internet network, and Demon was a DOS-based internet experience. There was no Windows internet in 1993. If you got Windows, it didn't have TCP/IP in it. And so I created something called EasyNet, and EasyNet was a Windows-based internet service that you could subscribe to for £10 a month. It was the first consumer ISP in Europe, and within 15 months it listed on the AIM market. And within a couple of years after that, went to the full London Stock Exchange. But you notice here I've still got thinking small and acting small. And that's because we didn't ever raise money for EasyNet, because we couldn't. A guy from Scarborough with a Yorkshire accent, and my co-founder was from Plymouth with a Plymouth accent, who went to Canterbury, and in his case Plymouth Polytechnic, were not candidates for venture capital in 1993. They took one look at us and said, you know, you're not like the people I drink with on a Saturday, so no. And there was only two venture firms in England then, 3i and Rothschild's Ventures, and neither would give us money. So we built the business by stuffing invoices in drawers and not paying them, collecting subscriptions, and growing from revenue, paying the bills when the legal claim came in, and never got sued, always paid the bills, but always at the very last minute, and eventually had enough revenue to do an AIM listing where we raised £2 million at a 20 million valuation in 1996. And by 1999, EasyNet was worth £700 million. But that was never the plan. It was an accident. It was a timing accident based on fortuitousness. So even though it was big, and it's still big, EasyNet still exists, I wasn't thinking big, and I wasn't acting big.
They tried to make me go to rehab. I said no, no, no.
By the 2000s, I moved to the United States. It happened because in '96 I was sent to New York, actually, by EasyNet to negotiate a merger. We were the owners of the world's first internet cafe called Siberia, and we wanted to merge it with a Boston-based company called Cybersmith. And I was sent to New York to work with an investment banking company called Allen & Co. And Allen & Co., the first thing they did is put me on the private jet of the Miami Dolphins and flew me from New York to Sun Valley in Idaho with 5 people who each could write checks of up to £100 million. And I kind of thought, this is awesome. From being this guy that can't raise money, that's either lucky or scrappy, suddenly people think that they should give me money. And it didn't take me very long to move to the United States, about a month. I left EasyNet because EasyNet, by then, was a public company, and the idea of changing the world was not very, the board didn't really entertain that idea. They just were very day-to-day. And I was the ideas guy. So I moved to the States, and I didn't move to New York. I moved to Silicon Valley. I lived there ever since. And I started a company called Real Names. Now, Real Names took its starting point from the fact that most of the world doesn't write in English, but the internet web addressing system was only in Latin characters. What if you could make it possible to navigate the internet using your own language? Chinese, Korean, Arabic, Hebrew, Russian, Cyrillic, and so on. So Real Names created a naming system. Today, if you go in Chrome and you type in the browser a keyword, sometimes it will take you to a website. Real Names invented that, the idea of a name going to a URL with no search results. If you got the right name, you just go right to the web page, and you don't need to know the www address. You just type in the keyword.
News Channel 11 at 6 starts now. A fake website has George W. Bush steaming mad.
Technology reporter Scott McGrew tells us why it has the Republican candidate so upset and why he can't stop it. Scott?
Alan, George W. Bush once said there ought to be limits to freedom. He said that when he was boiling mad about a website that uses his name without his permission. Tonight we show you the site and a possible solution to his problem. Type in georgewbush.com and you get this, the official site for the campaign. It has the top political story of the day, something called GWB-TV, and a little George W. Bush quiz. Now, type in gwbush.com and you get a very similar website. It looks authentic, but it doesn't take long before you're convinced this must be a spoof. Look again. Real website? Spoof website. That bothered Silicon Valley CEO Keith Teare. He runs an internet company called Real Names. Its computers work with yours to simplify the internet address system. For instance, instead of typing www.ford.com to get to a car company website, you just type Ford and off you go.
You don't need to know any dots or slashes or wwws.
I'll stop it there. It's a bit long, but you get the idea. Firstly, I was full of myself. Can you tell? My whole attitude was, I figured this out. So I was thinking big and acting big. And secondly, the world kind of cared because we had a naming system that could guarantee to take you to the right place. And Google, by the way, Larry and Sergey, who in that time, 2000, was not yet a big company, were our first partners. We created keywords and they called it I'm Feeling Lucky. We put real names keywords into Google search, and if you typed in, let's say, Ford Explorer, and we had that keyword right at the top of search, there would be this Ford Explorer with a link, and if you clicked on it, it would go right to the website. We were getting paid per click, 10 cents per click, actually, for every one of those keywords. Google wasn't getting paid anything. So we kind of invented paid keywords before there was Google AdSense or any of that. This is a book that talks about the controversy inside Google that gave rise to, because many of the engineers made the point that we're meant to be about the algorithm, and we've given these guys real names an override on the algorithm, which they had. Now, interesting enough, Microsoft did the same thing. Microsoft acquired a 20% stake in real names and put it into Internet Explorer, and you could go into Internet Explorer and type, Wall Street Journal Asia, and you would go to that exact website. And more interestingly, you could do that in Chinese or in Malay or in any of the languages of Asia. And suddenly we started getting deals with all kinds of people that led us to file for an IPO. This was 1999. And in 1999, it was the height of the bubble. We filed for a $1.5 billion IPO 2 years after I founded the company. So I'm feeling really big now. The Chinese government adopted real names as the official way to navigate the web in China and paid us $10 per keyword per year for every Chinese keyword. So it was like, wow. And then we shut down. And we shut down because I got too big for my boots. I actually believed that Microsoft was the tail and I was the dog. And by then, we were doing 1 billion consumers a quarter delivered to a website. And Microsoft decided they didn't like this experience because they wanted to compete with Google. And to compete with Google, they had to have a search engine. And when you typed a keyword in the browser, it shouldn't take you to a website, but it should give you search results. And then they could put ads on those search results, and they could make all the money instead of me. And that's what they did. And Real Names literally closed down. So thinking big and acting big led me to be hubristic, arrogant, and fail. I went on to create Accelerated Ventures with Michael Arrington here, and together we created TechCrunch in 2005, which was a very small idea, by the way, but a good idea. Michael's idea and Michael's business. We sold that in 2010.
When your legs don't work like they used to before.
And I mellowed out. And I began to invest. Archimedes Labs was the first thing I did. And it was my own money, so that keeps you honest, and it keeps you, what I would say, having a vision, but executing day to day, so you do the right thing, became very important to me. After a few years of doing my own investing and doing quite well, investing in startups in Silicon Valley, Lee Strafford and myself and David Carr, Michael Dimolo, and a few other founders created ADV. And ADV is about investing in big thinkers who can execute. And this really is the lesson that I want to leave you with. Having a vision is great. In fact, the biggest problem at ADV with companies that apply to us is the founders can't articulate a big vision. If you ask them, what will you be 10 years from now? They can't actually answer the question. What they can tell you is what they've done this year, and if you give them money, what they will do next year, but they can't tell you what it will be when it grows up, because they haven't really thought about the big vision very much. They're very, and in the UK, by the way, you get beaten up for big visions. People call you unrealistic. So you're taught not to articulate a big vision. And we want to hear a big vision because that's kind of what we invest in. But we don't want you to be arrogant, hubristic, and act as if you already know the answers. We want you to be able to execute. So that means we want to see what you did so far and what your roadmap is. And if you can combine those two together, you end up doing something big. I've got to finish now because I'm 50 seconds over, but I am about to work on another big vision called Venture Network. You can check it out at venturenetwork.io, where I'm one of the backroom guys for a guy called Yuri Rubinovich, which is a crypto fund that has a big vision, and I hope will execute. So check that out. Go to the ADV website if you want to apply for funding. ADV accepts funding requests only via the website. You don't need to know us. We're trying to revolutionize the way investing happens. And look forward to seeing you down the path. Thank you.